Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good, from science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I am Rafe, and it is going to be, it's going to be a great Bufnagle year. Happy New Year to you guys, because it's filled with all sorts of Bufnagle Tuesdays, which means it's Podcast Tuesday, which is a great thing. So for those of you out there that are making us the top 10% podcast that we are globally, thank you to you listeners for that. As usual, you can reach us at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. Remember to share the love, share the buff, give us a 5-star review, hit subscribe or like or whatever it is on that podcast app that you have that sends us a little note that says, hey, these guys are doing great. Please keep up the good work. Tell a friend to listen and you will get a free episode, as will your friend. And somewhere buried in the show notes is a link where you can buy me a coffee. That is a wonderful thing. It helps take care of life ain't free, right? So this kind of takes a little bit of the edge off, which makes it a wonderful thing for me. So like I said before, Happy New Year. This is the first episode that will drop in 2026. And it promises to be as good of a year as any other one. What do they say? Your mileage may vary, and past results are no guarantee of future returns, something like that. So anyway, it'll be a great year, I'm sure, because we'll have plenty of Tuesdays on which to drop some Bufnagle content. The book in my hand, in its French title, is Les Pierres Sauvages, which is The Wild Stones. It has an English title in its translation called The Stones of the Abbey. This book is out of print. It was given to me by a loyal Buff listener, a wonderful young architect I met a couple summers ago. He sent me a note and he said, I'm writing to you because I have a book recommendation you may enjoy. And then he sent me a copy of the book. He found it at an online used bookstore, and it came as rather a surprise. It came in the mail anonymously during a time late in 2025, when, let's just say, a lot of packages were coming to the house. And did you order a used book? Mrs. Bufnagle asked me one day, and of course I had no recollection, because I order, like, a lot of us, we order things and then they show up and then we've forgotten that we have ordered them. Sometimes I will pre-order certain books and then they will come months in the future, which means I have forgotten them because I ordered them months in the past. And like usual, I had no recollection if I had ordered a used book, and that's the sort of thing that happens during the shopping season in the Buff household. But I got the book and I had no idea what it was. It's a used book, and it is in, let's just say it's not in pristine condition, but that's fine with me. It came from Thrift Books, and I opened it up and it says something. It says Boston Public Library on the inside, and then it says, this book has been withdrawn. It is no longer property of the Boston Public Library. Sale of this material benefits the library. So apparently this was in the library in Boston at one point, and now it's no longer in the Boston Library. It is in the Bufnagle Library. So I wasn't sure what this was until I started reading, open it up. It says The Stones of the Abbey, and I'm like, what is this thing? And I got to the first page, which is page 11, of course. There's all sorts of preamble-y stuff. It looks like a journal, this book does, and it's there's a date on here, and it says third Sunday in Lent. The rain has soaked through our clothes. The frost has hardened the heavy stuff of our habits, congealed our beards, stiffened our limbs. The mud has bespattered our hands, our feet, and our faces. The wind has cloaked us in sand. The motion of walking no longer swings the frozen folds on our emaciated bodies, urged along in the pallid half light of this mistral-blown winter. following our own distorted shadows, we look like three saints in stone. We have been walking now for weeks, making our way down the valley of the Rhone toward Avignon, and thence to Notre-Dame de Floriel in the Diocese of Fréjus, on the estate of my cousin Raymond Berenger, Count of Barcelona. On this 5th day of March, 1161, in the 30th year since my coming to Chateau, I am once more directed to build a monastery. My orders came from our abbot. And that is the first entry. That's the third Sunday in Lent. 5th day of March, 1161. This is a story written. It is historical fiction. It is the journal of a Cistercian monk charged with building the Abbey of Le Thoronet. I thought as I read this, wow, this is going to be a fun book. Small snippets of a story in journal format. That's a great one for me because it makes it easy to read. It's much akin to Undaunted Courage, which is a book that we reviewed in episodes 14 and redropped in episode 266, the story of Lewis and Clark and their trip from St. Louis, their walking trip from St. Louis to the Pacific coast of Oregon and then back. So if you want to go to episodes 14 or 266 in the buff, you can get a little description of that great explorer that they did. Journal format, like I said, is easy to read, but it's still philosophically and prosaically, is that a word? Prosaically, like the prose is good. This is good prose, I think. And I think that first paragraph kind of reveals that. It's prosaically interesting and philosophically interesting as well. Like I said, this is a journal of a Cistercian monk charged with building the Abbey of Le Thoronet. So it's historical fiction. In this book, we learn of the narrator's philosophies, his hopes and fears, how he manages the men working with him, how he addresses his superiors and his people working underneath him, his inferiors, I guess. How he designs what will become the abbey, how the weather impacts building in the mid-12th century, how construction was done, and all sorts of things like that. But most of all, this story is a philosophical text dealing with an understanding of the nature of man and how we come to understand ourselves in the creative act. All right, so that's a thing that we talk a lot about on the buff, and I think that's probably why I was bequeathed with this edition. On the 21st of March, so that would be 16 days later, the narrator tells us what's happening on the feast of Saint Benedict. Moving from the whole to the detail, from the material to the immaterial, from the defined to the undefined, my thoughts and instincts will inspire methodical action, and my brain and my heart will pass from trance to practical detail without my being able to control them to any great degree. For the moment, my principal preoccupations are the positioning, the general shape, the orientation, obviously, of the abbey. There is one serious obstacle. The layout was determined before we arrived by the foundations already begun for the lay brother's dorter. A dorter is like a dormitory, a place to, it's a dormitory. It's where you sleep. Now I want to alter the direction of the church's axis so that it points directly toward the east. At first, I was tempted to abandon the work done so far. Today, I decided against this on account of the time and labor that would be wasted. The irregular angle will show on the plans. Will this basic fault matter? I cannot yet make up my mind. If I had been here at the beginning, it is certain that I would not willingly have drawn an obtuse angle on the site where the cloisters were to be. As I was writing, the noise of the quarry gave way to silence. The lay brothers have ended a day of apprentice work. This sudden quiet set me thinking about the stone, about the quarrying, shaping, and appearance of it. I have examined this material closely. No saw can get a bite on it, and under the chisel it shatters like bad glass. We shall make something of it. Freshly shaped, the stone is a light, warm yellow ochre. In times it will become a golden gray. Light seems to lay on it, in turn, all the colors of the prison, so that the gray is compounded of and impregnated with sunlight. The raw blocks torn from the ground, measured and scored, become noble material. Each stroke, each visible flash of light bears witness to energy and perseverance. Are not we Cistercian monks like these stones, torn from secular life, scored and chiseled by the rule, our faces illuminated by faith, marked by our struggles with the enemy? Enter into the stone and be yourselves as living stones, raising an edifice of holy priests. So I read that section. Sometimes I read appropriate materials when we go to adoration on Fridays. I read this one morning on adoration, and it hit me, well, quite like a rock. What was really funny about that, I was reading along, and he's discussing what he's going to do and how the quarry makes sounds and what the stone is like. And I didn't see the metaphor coming until it was right in front of me, and then it hit me, like I said, like a rock. And I wondered, how could I have missed that? That is a wonderful metaphor about understanding not only Cistercian monks, but just people in general. Are not we Cistercian monks like these stones? You remember the stones, right? This stone is, I've examined the material closely. No saw can get a bite on it, and under the chisel, it shatters like bad glass. Okay, the part of the story is, the whole story here is the stone that they're using to build this abbey is not really good stone. It's hard to quarry, it's hard to work. It like I said, it breaks. It's hard to saw, and the work of getting the stone, which is the first step in building a stone building, is getting the stone. The work of getting the stone and dressing the stone and preparing the stone is hard, and this work is very bad. But he says, we will make something out of it. Freshly shaped, the stone is a light, warm yellow ochre. In time, it will become a golden gray. This is okay. If you need a lesson on metaphor and you're in 7th grade, here's a great one. Okay, you are the stone. You are the stone. The book is full of insights like this. The author is Fernand Pouillon, and this book was written in the early 1960s when he was in jail. The English translation I have is from 1970. Pouillon was born in 1912. He was a French architect, urban planner, builder, contractor, and writer. He was active and influential post-World War II, and he worked mostly in France. He's remembered for his use of noble building materials, especially stone, his seamless integration of all phases of the building process, his inexpensive and efficient building techniques, and for his harmonious juxtaposition of forms. Okay, I really have no idea what that last little sentence means, but that's what he did. He's noted as a modernist architect who nonetheless respected the historical street grid and is honored for affordable housing in France and abroad. Wikipedia says, due to his success, ostentation, and his imperious personality. Wow, he's an architect and he has those things. He attracted the jealousy and ill will of many. His was a tumultuous life, including prison time and a prison escape. Okay, now I was really into it. Okay, I'm going to read this. And some architectural critics say he will be remembered as one of the great French architects of the 20th century. Like I said, he was born in 1912, and at age 15, he entered the School of Beaux-Arts in Marseille. And for a year, he studied drawing and sculpture and architecture, but he did not get his degree officially until later. He moved to Paris, where he worked on construction, and he worked on the construction and commercial sides of building. And he did that for several years. At age 22, he built his first project, and his experience doing hands-on work there with all the facets of the construction process differentiated him from many of his contemporaries, who Wikipedia says focused a lot more on the academic and not on the construction technique. So he's a little different than most of his contemporaries, because he actually understood what the worker guys were going through and how the whole construction process works. Right after the war, okay, so he was born in 12, so he was 30 and 42, so he was in late 30s at the end of the war, and he started doing a lot of building there. He became very successful by the early and mid 1950s. His practice was booming, and he had lots of projects going in France and Algeria and Iran, and his firm employed dozens of architects, and he made a great deal of money. And then he got into trouble. Okay, so he in March of 1961, he was arrested and imprisoned for his role in the bankruptcy of a company that he helped to create, and also in developing this place called Point-Neger, a housing project outside of Paris. The cause of the bankruptcy are complex and included undercapitalization and self-dealing by the officers. The charges include fraud and misuse of corporate assets. He was accused of violating securities laws in order to sidestep rules separating architects' roles from project construction, finance, and commercialization. That is, he was charged with using false identities and corporate identities to participate in the development and finance of the project. He also appeared to have lied himself with unscrupulous or incompetent partners. It's not clear exactly how much he knew about these sorts of things. You get... I don't know what he did. Did he do it wrong and he knew he did it wrong? Was it obvious? Did he not care? Was he just trying to get things done and willing to take a chance and cut a corner? Anyway, in March he was arrested. March 61. In September of 61, he was ejected from the Order of Architects in France for breach of professional ethics. In September of 62, so a year later, he escaped to Italy from prison. Okay, so it's 1962, and apparently this was like a prison health clinic, and he escaped somehow. And for several months, he waited out in Italy until his trial came by, and he was found guilty, but he was partially acquitted on appeal, and he got a sentence that was approximately the same amount of time he had already spent in jail. So he was sentenced to time served. While he was in prison, he wrote La Pierre Sauvage, which is the book I'm reading here, right? And it won some kind of award. And he also wrote some memoirs. He was released from prison in September of 64. And by this time, he was in ruins, and his wife had left him, and he was thrown out of the architect thing. And so he moved to Algeria to try to rebuild his name. By 71, he was, a decade later, he was pardoned by the French president. In 78, he was readmitted to the French Architects Order. He returned to Paris in 84, and he died in July of 86 after having, people seemed to like him by that time, so he was back. So this guy wrote this book, okay, and he was kind of a modern architect who, he had respect for the natural materials, they say. So, do what you want. It's not up to me. Do what moves you there, as long as it's true and good and beautiful. So this book really reflects his appreciation of the craft of building, even the little parts. And there's pieces in here where he talks, here on page 76, he talks about the feast of Saint Camilla on the 18th day of July. He's working with the potter. Okay, just pottery stuff. All right, this book, I wasn't around in the 12th century, but it was kind of interesting to see how much stuff they had to do. Had to do everything. You couldn't call Home Depot and have them deliver, building stones. You couldn't get a load of gravel from the local supply and have it dumped in a truck. You had to haul things by hand, unless you had a beast of burden like a mule, and you could help haul these things. And there's a lot of stories about how difficult that whole project was. They made these little cranes and things, hand operated cranes to lift the stones out of the, after you cut the stone out of the ground, you lift it out, and then you have to get it where it needs to go. And there were a lot of people doing a lot of really hard work. And you could, it was handwork, right? There weren't machines to do this. If you were lucky, you had a blacksmith on site, and they did. But the blacksmith kept the machines running, which means that it gave the men something to hold in their hands while they beat on the rocks with hammers and chisels. So on the Feast of St. Camilla, he says, "It is always a pleasure to meet Joseph the Potter. Old and bent, with a small round head, he is baked in the sun like a brick, and then stewed in 5 quarts of wine every day. Thin, wrinkled, and white-haired, he looks at me keenly, maliciously, even malevolently. His huge hands, beautiful in the precision of their movements, are given to caressing his pots. His feet are bare and contracted from perpetually working the wheel, so that his arms and legs look out of proportion, and his body is lumpy and bent like a great knot. This morning he greeted me thus. See, Father, the work is getting on. Have a look at this clay in the pit. It is always right, pliable, well moistened, not too much nor too little, a couple of pints from time to time. It needs just as much as I do, no more, no less. I looked around the workshop. I had not been there for some time. I had heard that Joseph's wheel had arrived, and what was more important, that the first tiles were ready for firing. What are they like? I asked. Thereupon he sat down at the head of a low, raw-looking table, settling himself there as if for a ceremony. It was a massive, squat bench, its great close-set legs bound, pegged, and braced by cross diagonals, a table so heavy that it took 4 men to move it, one at each corner. On his right he set a stool, on the stool an earthenware pot, and into the pot he poured water. On his left there was another stool, on which he settled a tray of fine, bright yellow sand. While this was going on, I noticed his quick glances seeking my approval, and his tight-lipped mouth curved in a half-smile. Then he went to his earth pit, lifted up the damp cloths, and brought back a lump of clay weighing at least 60 pounds. His movements were slow and unhurried. Joseph was showing me that he was going through the complete operation, but not more quickly than usual. 3 implements were hanging at the bench. The first, a trapezium-shaped iron frame, half an inch thick. The second, a flat ruler. The third, a thick, rounded form, a massive wooden tile halved at its broadest side like a convex scoop turned over. After placing the iron frame with the trapezium's long base toward him, he grasped the table corners with 2 hands, lowered his head, closed his eyes, and then with a gesture directed to me to stand clear, no doubt to protect me from the splashing. This pantomime, I realized, signified, "There, I am settled. Now I can begin." Precise ritual movements followed in rapid succession. He plunged his hands into the tray and sprinkled a thin layer of sand on the frame and the table. Then he dug his fingers into the lump of clay. His thumbs met, his fingers closed, and he extracted a piece of clay that was exactly right. In the same movement, he dropped it into the center of the frame, where it spread out to fill 3/4 of the trapezium. Continuing his smooth movements, he dipped his hands in the pot of water, then spread the clay and pushed it into the corners, wet and shiny, as it was squashed and molded. With the flat ruler, the beater, he smoothed it over and over, pressing lightly on each edge of the frame in turn. At this point, he stopped, asked me to watch carefully, and repeated his movements, slightly tilting the beater now one way, now another. He murmured, "It has to be worked toward the middle. That's where it takes the stress." Swiftly, he lifted the frame, slid the slab to the edge of the table, and caught it on the rounded form. The slab molded itself to the implement's shape. It had become a tile. And then he turned round, took a few steps, and set it on the ground next to some hundreds of others protected by straw matting. With one sharp, precise movement, he slipped it off, and it kept its shape like a supported arch, delicately balanced, a marvelously enduring compromise between clay's plasticity and the laws of stress. Too stiff a mixture would have made the shaping long and difficult. Too soft, the tile would have collapsed or warped. The ceremony was over. Joseph looked at all his children underneath their mats, turning his head without altering his stance, head to one side and hands on hips. He looked at me with a smile. The attitude expressed the craftsman's vanity. I was full of admiration, and Joseph realized it. He changed then and looked over his row of tiles, simulating my own very real feeling. I guessed that he was going to apologize. "Ah, Father, the magic, you see, it's not in me, it's in the sand. This devilish stuff rolls and slips and gets tricky, but the sand tenses it. You saw just now, it didn't stick. The frame didn't pull away any. It slid over the table, and then whoops." He grasped the handle and with a jerk indicated the movement he had first made when stooping over the bench. "Oh," he said, "when I go past one of my roofs, I know that I have caressed it 1,000 times. And that is a grand feeling." It is true, all these things are the work of his hands, from the moment when he plucks out the clay with his great fingers until the day when he empties the kiln. 100 times over he will have caressed that ever-beautiful surface with the smoothing gesture that brings out the quality of the material. Long did I gaze on those shapes that are to lie side by side for centuries. I wish they may love each other and live happily together. I would really like Joseph to know all the things I am thinking, to believe in all the things I can appreciate, to understand that what I have seen is one of the joys of my life. And when I was in France in 2024, we got to see a tile factory, and it wasn't a single guy working on a bench. It was a guy and his wife and a small number of other other helpers, other employees, and they made tiles. They made roof tiles, and they had a machine. It was run by like belts and pulleys and things like this, and it kind of made tiles, and they came out, and there was a lot of handwork in all these things, even though there were mechanic portions of it. And I thought of that as I read this section, and how all these tiles, they're all the same, but they're all slightly different because they're handmade. And this is the guy who wrote this is channeling into the main character, his love of the craft and the work that people do by hand. And I'm a big appreciator of people who do things by hand. And even if they do them by hand with machines, it is you get to understand the nature of the craft, right? And being creator and creating a creation, we know that that the mark of the creator is left in that which he creates. So it is that was a great piece, and that the book is filled with little things like that. My favorite passage, though, maybe toward the end. The narrator, the guy who's the master builder, who narrates the whole story, he's gotten injured, and all through the story there's this continuing arc of his wound on his leg, and he has to go back to. He's going to go back to Chateau, and he gets called back because that's his job is done there. He's got everything set up, everything's running, the plans are made, and things. The kids can now go and finish the job. He's getting back on the 5th of December, the feast of Saint Sabas, and he's talking about what's going to happen when he's gone. And there's some. If you want, you can put the allegory in place. He's an old man. This is the last thing he's going to do. I am still thinking as if I were going to stay. The memories I came to collect are just so many plans for the future. Even so, it really was a farewell tour. On the way to the site, we paid a visit to the blacksmith. Our universal man did not stop work as we approached, because his bar was red and malleable, rapidly being flattened in a shower of sparks. There was a smell of sulfur, of burnt hoof, of leather, of sweat, of scorched hair, of soot, of ashes, of horse dung, and of molten lead. A blacksmith forge is always tidy and clean in its own way, with its anvil polished and the tools neatly hung between pairs of nails on the wall, its earthen floor sprinkled and swept each day. Antim, he's the smith. Antim looked like a pagan god with his great beard as he went on striking without seeing us. This man of leather is being sulky with me. Like a dog, he can scent my imminent departure. He has known since the moment the decision was taken, just as he knows when an animal will kick, when iron is flawed, and when the lead is about to melt, and when the iron will harden without going brittle. He knows, too, that without him, everything would come to a standstill. The animals would not be able to walk, the wheels to turn, the stones to reach the scaffold planking, nor the water to reach the abbey. The trees would remain in the earth and the blocks in the ground. The sullen man continues to strike. I wanted to say, stop grumbling. Try to understand. You must. I am counting on you, you devil of a smith. The site is no longer the site is not me any longer. It is all of you. But the sweat ran down his cheeks and trickled into his beard. Sweat or tears from smarting reddened eyes or something else, not worthy of him, which he wiped away with the back of his hand. We made a detour through the workshops, which stood empty and dead. in the fine weather. On rainy days, they are full of different noises, squeakings, thuds, and gratings. When they are lifeless, these rooms look as if they had been abandoned months ago. Yet tomorrow, perhaps, they will look as though the work never stops. Each stranded tool will find its hand so that the plank may be clamped, nailed, grooved, and assembled. Waste fibers will be twisted into ropes. All these amorphous lumps will become wheels, handles, pulleys, pack saddles, sledges, and harnesses. This whole world was my life. To speak of it and evoke it gives me a sense of both pain and relief, like a scab pulled off by one's nail. This evening I need to relive my impressions. I had kept the sight until the end, seeing in it the final object of all these disparate and often mystifying exertions, the sight where men are more proud, more assured, and more free. Down in the quarry, the men are like slaves. At the sawmill, independent. At the kilns, joyful. And at the workshops, rushed and busy. Here, at the site, they are proud. The other men are servants. These are the masters. I was like a curious passerby who stares in astonishment. I wanted to say, "What are you doing here? Why have you abandoned these trenches to stagnant water? What are these shapeless heaps? Why are these vats full of some turgid smoking stuff? How do you know what to use this stone for? This one that is 1 foot by 2, this one which is irregular and crooked, or this one finished on 5 sides but rough on the 6th." All right, so this little paragraph where he says, I was like a curious passerby who stares in astonishment. These are the kinds of questions that I always ask when the buff goes on tours and stuff, like we did the other day, going to the sawmill. I ask all these silly, stupid passerby questions that are very obvious to them, but I'm on the outside. And he says, I wanted to ask these things. I wanted to ask these bufnagle questions. He continues, "Imagine being that intruder who had wandered into our valley, suddenly thunderstruck to see stone being torn out of the ground by that great claw which grips it when the rope goes taut. Like him, I have watched the men at their windlash, watchfully following the path of the block as it leaps up and stands out against the dark blue sky with its sharp and dazzling edges, and then the 3 ant-men above who finger the stone, examine it, handling it cautiously, turning it, and gently, with a slight movement of the finger, leisurely steer it. Magically, the block comes to rest in its allotted place, and the wall seems none the higher for it, since the stone has filled its space discreetly, as though nothing had really happened. And why are you plugging the joints with that clay? And why are you pouring gray water from that bowl into those funnels? All this kind of work is laughable. Just little everyday jobs, tireless efforts are rewarded, as are those of pitiable insects. One says, at this rate, never the anthill, never the beehive, never the wall. Yet there are already 2 yards. Next month there will be 4. And one day the traveler will come back and say, well, already finished. That didn't take them long. He will not have witnessed the work in the mud, the rocks in their hundreds of thousands being painfully dressed over the years, the stone which stands firm against their disparate strokes. He will not have spared a thought for the burning lime, the mangling wheel, the snapping ropes, the stifling heat, the sandstorm which stings the eyes and pushes a man off his balance, the drenching rain, the clumsy blue hands, the frost which destroys yesterday's work, the human error which builds only to pull down again, and the forgotten tool that falls and kills. The work on a site lasts longer than a war and is less inspiring. Its battles are the dangerous work patrols which set out every day, but victory is certain. The victory over the Virgin's bouquet nailed up there at the tip of the steeple at the blacksmith's cross. Someday it will come. After a long time, meanwhile, men die every year. Men leave the game, and a few of them will see the victory. I am leaving, it is settled. But one day may the Lord allow me to come back and hear the greeting of those men. From the clay of the foundations to the iron of the cross, who will finally have seen victory without death. And he goes on to tell more about what he's feeling and thinking as he's leaving. It is, I loved it. Maybe you fast forwarded through me reading. I think the prose is grand. It's not Dickens. It's certainly not Hemingway. It is not Shakespeare, but it has a real rhythm to it. and a real expression to it. And to me, it feels like craft stone and woodwork, and two of the things I really enjoy. And it is interesting in its philosophy. All right, the whole book is like those chapters. Sometimes the entries are just a sentence on a given day, and sometimes they're 10 pages. The book reads like those snippets I have given you. I'm not going to spoil the endings. There are some things that you will never see coming. I will leave those for you. I thought there's some things popped out at the end. I was like, wow, I didn't think to tie that up. and he did. All in all, I think this is a really fun read, and it moves a little slowly at times. There are times when you're reading, you're like, wow, it took me a long time to read those 2 pages. But life in the 12th century was rather slow as well. And I thought it fit. There are discussions of architecture and monastic life, of dreams and hopes and aspirations, of medicine and discipline, of virtue and humanity. Mostly it's a story that reveals the nature of man in the act of creation, of an individual man fulfilling his obligation as a unique manifestation of Imago Dei. The stones of the abbey are not those dug from the quarry, those pulled out of the earth and placed into foundations and walls and arches. The stones, instead, are the men of flesh and blood who, like me, nearly a millennium later, no saw can get a bite on, and under the chisel we shatter like bad glass. But hopefully, perhaps against my most strenuous objections, my author shall make something out of me before this story is completed. I am grateful. I wish there were a word bigger, wish there were adjectives to put in front of that. Capital letters, underlines, and bolds. 10-point font, spinning and sparkling. I'm grateful to your listeners out there, like this young man who sent me the book. I am humbled and honored that he thought of me, and it is for all of you in general, and for listeners like him in particular, that I do this bufnagle labor of love. You are the stones I find in my life, both those I dig out of the ground and those that my author has put into the foolish paths that I decide to take. Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to 2026. Remember to seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, and enjoy the adventure of life.
It's going to be a great day.